Your Excellencies, distinguished speakers, colleagues, and participants, it is a deep honor and great privilege for me to welcome you all to our conference today, vital for freedom, solidarity with the struggles of women of Afghanistan. And I sincerely appreciate the distinguished organizers who have not only supported this event but taken a clear and principled stand in solidarity with the women of Afghanistan. The permanent nations of Switzerland, the United Kingdom, the European Union, the permanent nation of France, the Netherlands, Chile, Finland, and Luxembourg, as well as our civil society partners, have all contributed to making this gathering possible. Your support brings weight, credibility, and visibility to our advocacy at a time when silence was becoming complicity. We are honored to have such widespread support and global solidarity. It sends a powerful message that we are not alone in these struggles for justice, dignity, and basic human rights. Over the last 4 years, Afghan women lead human rights organizations have documented gender-based violations, providing testimony to international human rights bodies and justice mechanisms, and work tirelessly to bring the truth of life and the Taliban rule to the global stages. This conference builds on that momentum. I would like to, take too much time. I just would like to move our panelists, and then the first speaker will be Excellency Ambassador Sir Ahmad al-Mashar, who is the representative of Afghanistan to the United Nations. Excellency Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Azizi, distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. I know it's been a very active week, a marathon of running from one meeting to another. And there have been a lot of meetings about Afghanistan, so I really appreciate your patience. It shows that we are really struggling hard to keep Afghanistan in the focus in the international multilateral organizations, given the world is facing really dark days and difficult challenges around the world. So for me, it's a profound honor, the permanent mission of Afghanistan and all of the other co-sponsors, to convene this critical conference focusing on the dire situation facing women and girls in Afghanistan, the need for coordinated and effective international response to the current human rights, humanitarian, and political legitimacy crisis cannot be overstated. The gravity of this crisis calls for our collective, urgent, united, and unwavering commitment from all stakeholders, member states, civil society organizations, and international organizations. And I'm glad that we have a number of member states and also civil society working together to address aspects of this crisis. Since August 2021, we have witnessed an alarming deterioration of fundamental rights and freedoms in Afghanistan, particularly for women and girls. Systematic violations have become a new norm, and women and girls relegated to the shadow of society. Their voices, once vibrant and courageous, are increasingly silenced, further entrenched in the cycle of violence and oppression. This conference aims to eliminate their experiences, elevate their voices, and galvanize international action to reinstate the right and dignity of them and everyone in Afghanistan. This session is probably not maybe a theoretical or abstract discussion, but it's rooted, as you will see, in the live realities of those we seek to support in Afghanistan. I extend my gratitude to the distinguished speakers here in this room, the Special Rapporteur on the situation of Afghanistan, Mr. Bennet, for joining us, and also Ms. also Special Rapporteur, and the Ms. Rana Bandana from SIDAO, and other colleagues from Dr. Akil, from the Global Accountability Initiative, and also all our Afghan speakers who are joining us. Our people's struggle and resistance in the face of tyranny, injustice, and the gross violation of human rights continue and our civil society groups bring testimonies from inside and exile. What we hear in these days, in the past couple of days, here in this body and also in the other premises of the UN are not anecdotes. They are also call for action. The empowerment of women in Afghanistan and girls is not only a matter of justice and equality, but it's a vital for prosperity and stability of Afghanistan as a whole. History has shown us that the societies that prioritize gender equality are more resilient, more inclusive, and ultimately more successful. The panels that follow will focus on the pressing themes, beginning with the voices from the ground. This session will seek to elevate the life experiences of the Afghan women through powerful testimonies from women human rights defenders, survivors, and exiled activists. It's imperative that we amplify these voices, that they carry stories and immense suffering and extraordinary resilience of our people. We seek to provide a platform where their experiences are not only acknowledged, but also serve as a reminder of urgent need for sustained international attention. This is what we all do to the human rights violations in Afghanistan. I would like to conclude, and I will let the panels and the speakers to speak for themselves. So as we embark on this important dialogue, we have to uphold our commitment to the principles of human rights. I think something which is very dear, but at the same time very difficult these days. But also keep a deep and abiding respect for the resilience and the strength of women of Afghanistan, women and girls in Afghanistan. The stakes have never been higher, and the call for action has never been more urgent. Together, we can foster an environment where their rights are recognized and their voices are heard and their futures are brighter. And with this, I thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your remarks, Your Excellency. Now I would like to invite Excellency Claire Touré, Deputy Permanent Representative of France to the United Nations in Geneva, to deliver her remarks. Excellency, you have 7 minutes.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much, Monsieur Ambassador, Monsieur Hospital. First of all, I want to congratulate all the organizers and the other co-sponsors of the event. As you were saying, and the Ambassador also, it's so important at this moment to keep this unacceptable situation as a priority on the international agenda. Since the Taliban's return to power in 2021, women and girls in Afghanistan have systematically been deprived of their rights, such as the freedom of movement, education, work, healthcare, and freedom of expression. In the latest report of the Special Rapporteur, and we'll hear more and look forward to it, we can see the devastating consequences of the decision taken on the back of the Taliban's so-called law on the promotion of virtue and the prevention of vice, that discriminated against women and girls while persecuting and segregating them. The enforcement of these unjustifiable decisions have erased Afghan women from education, public and economic life, and unjustly restricted their rights to freedom of movement, education, work, healthcare, expression, and access to justice. By excluding half of the country's population from public and economic life, as you were saying, Mr. Ambassador, these infringements are a major hindrance to the country's development. France reiterates its condemnation of the serious and systematic human rights violation by the Taliban and the need for the Taliban to respect the principles set out in the UN Security Council Resolution 2593 and urged them to reverse without delay all restrictions imposed on women and girls and abide by Afghanistan international obligations. In the face of Taliban obscurantism and their relentless attacks, France reaffirms its full solidarity with the Afghan people and supports humanitarian projects carried out by the United Nations agencies and programs, by NGOs on the ground in the areas of education, health, and for Afghan women and girls. France will remain committed. We commend the work of human rights defenders to advocate for justice, and especially women's rights defenders and their allies, whose dedications and perseverance is remarkable. They are continuing to find creative ways to work within the Taliban-controlled justice system and to advocate for international action, justice protection, the restoration of Afghan women human rights, and fundamental freedoms. France stands by them. We also remain committed with the Afghan people in multilateral fora, notably here at the Human Rights Council, but also at the UN Security Council, where France recently organized a meeting with Afghan women to allow them to present their views and recommendations on the Doha process. Finally, let me reiterate that more than ever, accountability must be a priority. I thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Excellency. Now we are moving to Mr. Bennet. Mr. Bennet, so in your role as the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Afghanistan, you have documented widespread systematic violations of human rights in Afghanistan. From your perspective, what are the most urgent actions the international community must take now to prevent marginalization of gender persecution? You have 7 minutes, Mr.
Thank you, Ms. Azizi. Congratulations to you for your leadership of Shama and for hosting this event today, and also thanks to all the co-sponsors for the event. I'd also like to take a moment to greet my colleagues Reem Al-Salam and Vandana Rana, respectively from CEDAW, or from the other way around, from Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and CEDAW. I've talked a lot this week, both in the Council and side events, so I'm going to spare you a repetition of my assessment of the current situation in Afghanistan for human rights, and particularly for women and girls. I will just say a couple of sentences and then move on to the question, which I think is a really good one. Thank you. In my recent report, I say that the Taliban has instrumentalized or weaponized the justice system to enforce, entrench, and sustain the group's repressive and misogynistic ideology, perpetuating their crimes against humanity. And that while women and girls certainly bear the brunt of this oppression, no one is spared. Men, boys, LGBT, gender diverse persons, ethnic and religious minorities, geographically marginalized communities face a repressive regime that dictates almost every aspect of life. And the situation is compounded from those, especially women and girls, from minority and marginalized communities who faced layered discrimination and exclusion as a result of intersecting identities. Your question on the normalization of gender persecution is timely and relevant. I thank you for that. During this week, I've been reflecting that when the question is asked about what more the international community can do, part of the answer may be to set out what the international community should not do. So I'm going to start with that. Because what may appear neutral or innocuous on the surface may empower or embolden the de facto authorities. Simply staying silent can send the wrong message. So thank you to states for speaking out in the Human Rights Council, and please do so in other forums, including if and when you are in dialogue with the Taliban, especially in private meetings. Saying nothing or going through the motions and saying something but not including consequences for unacceptable policies or behavior may be taken by them as implicit endorsement, or at least that there will be no consequences. Please don't take steps that could reward or empower the Taliban, even inadvertently. Now that brings me to what you could do. The all-tools approach that I've been promoting now for almost a couple of years, I think. I've consistently called for an approach which comprises a range of interventions which, when combined, exceed the sum of their parts and maximize the potential for the emergence of a safe, stable, and inclusive Afghanistan. Accountability is central to this, and it's crucial to send a strong message to the de facto authorities that there will be consequences for their actions. This can be achieved by utilizing and strengthening existing accountability mechanisms, and a number of such efforts are underway. This includes the ICC investigation, the initiative to hold Afghanistan accountable for violations under CEDAW, which may come before the ICJ, the codification of gender apartheid as a crime under international law, and the establishment of a comprehensive and complementary, the two C's today, independent accountability mechanism. I call on all member states to provide financial and political support to these initiatives. As I highlight in my recent report and said during my presentation earlier this week, accountability often extends beyond legal measures to include the restoration of rights, access to essential services, and the creation of conditions in which women, girls, and all Afghans can live with dignity. That's why I'm calling on states to support financially, politically, and diplomatically, number one, strengthened and sustained support for Afghan-led civil society, in particular women-led NGOs in country and in exile, in particular those providing legal support, advice, and representation, or operating safe houses and emergency relocation. Two, the recognition of economic and social rights as a vehicle to secure justice and protection, in particular through provision of humanitarian support and assistance, and full funding of the Humanitarian Needs Response Plan, which is currently just 16% funded, almost halfway through the year. Expanding education and economic empowerment opportunities, and providing protection and support for Afghan refugees, including supporting countries hosting refugees. Three, protection and support also for men and boys, especially those who are allies, including through legal assistance, mental health support, and where necessary, relocation or humanitarian visa pathways. I also call for financial support for efforts to engage young men and boys as positive agents of change. Number four, the centering of women's rights, voices, and agency, ensuring their safe, equal, and meaningful participation in all discussions and strategies for the future of the country, including human rights benchmarks for engagement with the Taliban, safe and meaningful inclusion of Afghan women in discussions and decisions about the future. And finally, I'm looking forward very much to the panel discussions. I want to stress the importance of a principled approach to the crisis in Afghanistan, one which is rooted in human rights and prioritizes dignity, equality, and non-discrimination. There must be no normalization of engagement unless and until there are demonstrated improvements in human rights, in particular for women and girls. And any normalization of engagement without such improvements would not only be vastly premature, they take us further away from our ultimate aim, a stable, inclusive, and rights-respecting Afghanistan. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the remarks. Now, as a transition to our first panel, I would like to invite the first panelist. Thank you so much. Yes, Madam Special Rapporteur, Salim, Ms. Asila Wardak, Zakia Muhammad, and Parwana Najori. Yeah, thank you so much, Madam Nimal Salim, the UN Special Rapporteur on violence against women and girls. My question to you as the UN Special Rapporteur on discrimination against women and girls is what steps must the international community take now to confront this systematic discrimination in Afghanistan, and how can the accountability mechanism be strengthened to address the specific targeting of women and girls by the Taliban? You have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much to the Permanent Mission of Afghanistan and all organizers for holding this important event and also for inviting me. It's very important to continue to talk about the situation of women and girls in Afghanistan, since it's been overshadowed, as was rightly mentioned by His Excellency the Ambassador, by many other very gruesome crises in which women and girls suffer. And though in recent, let's say, years, I have come to see the unfolding genocide in Palestine, and particularly the deliberate killing of Palestinian women and girls as a watershed moment that really marked and defined the erosion of the respect for international law and humanitarian human rights law that protects women and girls everywhere, and that emphasizes the need to protect their lives, safety, and dignity. There was another watershed moment that preceded that, which is precisely also the treatment, the atrocious, oppressive, and discriminatory treatment of Afghan women and girls before that. They are both related. I mention them together because they are related. What happens in Afghanistan doesn't stay in Afghanistan, was perhaps the initial kind of warning that we are going into really problematic times for women and girls. And we've seen that then develop also or continue in places like Haiti, Sudan, the DRC. Of course, the mistreatment and discrimination has always been there, but I think we see an intensity of crimes, a new level of crimes. And when we look at Afghanistan, the fact that we're looking at, oppression version number 2, because this is not the first time that we have it, makes it all the more really problematic that the international community has allowed this to happen for the second time. I will not speak about the treatment of Afghan women and girls, the details of that, because of course we are joined by a few of our Afghan sisters here. And frankly, Afghanistan is another one of those situations where we know what is happening. It's not the lack of knowledge. Afghan women and girls, their male allies, the UN, the special procedures, we have all been talking about what has been happening. We are all aware about what is happening in Afghanistan. So again, it's not, the lack of action is not for the lack of knowledge, unfortunately. Looking at the way forward, because this is really the question that we have, I'm glad that Richard already laid the grounds for that, so I'm not going to repeat what he said, because I agree, in fact, with a lot of the points he mentioned, and I was going to mention them as well. I'm going to present my report next week to the Council, and there within that report, I offer also sort of thinking about how we can use existing legal frameworks much more comprehensively. And in fact, in addition to the legal concepts and tools which we have, for example, the underutilized, unfortunately, concept of gender-based persecution, which is reflected in the Rome Statute and others, I believe that we should be also using the Genocide Convention, Article 2. I believe that the women and girls in Afghanistan could qualify as a national group under the Genocide Convention, Article 2. Because the travaux préparatoires was very flexible and didn't really define the scope of that term. The drafters of the convention actually deliberately left the term national group without a precise definition to allow for encompassing collectives with shared cultural, historical, or social identities. So not limiting it to groups tied to legal citizenship or state nationality. That said, in my view, Afghan women and girls, Afghan females, form a distinct collective within the Afghan nation, unified by their female sex and their shared experiences of oppression and violence based on their sex. And so, given that the objective of the Genocide Convention is to provide protection for groups targeted for the collective identity, Afghan females, I think, would qualify as being subjects of that convention, as being half of the population, and as being a permanent and inseparable part of the Afghan nation that is yet singled out for destruction. And by destruction, which is what the Genocide Convention talks to us about, destruction I don't think is limited to only physical destruction. I think it can also refer to psychological destruction. And as was mentioned, and also in the Special Rapporteur on Afghanistan's report, and I mentioned it also in mine, we know about the huge, immense psychological toll that this marginalization, exclusion, oppression is having on the psychological well-being of Afghan women and girls. So if they are being destroyed in whole or in part, I think there is a psychological destruction that is happening at the same time. So we are talking about new levels of crimes that are being perpetrated against women and girls, and I think what is happening in Afghanistan is one of them. As I said, I'm not going to repeat what Richard said, so please assume that everything he said I agree with. That said, when it comes to sort of legal avenues, I know that we are all exploring ways to hold the de facto authorities accountable for this, but I think we also need to reflect about how we can hold states accountable that through their full engagement, ties, normalizations with the de facto authorities, without accompanying it with any pressure on the de facto authority to reverse its policies towards women and girls, how they are failing their international responsibility towards women and girls in Afghanistan. The reason I say this is because CEDAW, which most of the world is a signatory of, did not specify that your responsibility is only towards women on your territory or women that are nationals of your own country. That responsibility extends to all women and girls. So that's why, for example, when we say that countries that export arms to armed groups or governments that then use these arms in order to kill indiscriminately are violating their rights under CEDAW and are violating the rights under international law. And then, of course, there are a number of articles that like Article 2, General Recommendation 25, they emphasize a state's obligation to address extraterritorial violations of women's rights, especially where they have influence and leverage. There's a due diligence principle also that states must exercise due diligence to prevent, investigate, and punish acts of gender-based violence and discrimination, including by non-state actors. CEDAW talks about international cooperation. So I think this is sort of one aspect that is perhaps not explored in its full potential when we collectively think about strategies on the way forward. So I will stop here and thank you once again for the invitation.
Thank you very much, Madam Special Rapporteur, for your remarks. Now we move on to Ms. Asila Wardak, Human Rights Advocate and member of the Women's Forum on Afghanistan. Ms. Wardak, you have long been an advocate of Afghan women's meaningful participation in peace and political process. In this current climate, how do you see Afghan women reclaiming space, and what should be done to ensure their inclusion, their inclusion is not symbolic but impactful? Over to you. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Ms. Azizi, and good afternoon to everybody. I would like to take the opportunity and thanks the organizer of this meeting and inviting me, and also those member states that co-sponsored today's event, and also organization that they supported and co-sponsored the event. It means a lot to us. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and allies, since August 2021, Afghanistan became a prison for women and girls. Under Taliban rule, women have been completely erased from public life. Their rights, freedom, and visibility have been stripped away. But even in the face of this brutality, Afghan women have not surrendered. Today, reclaiming space is not just a demand. It's an act of resistance. It's a daily practice of resilience, often carried out in silence, often invisible to the world, but deeply powerful. Afghan women are still here, they are still raising their voices, continuing advocating, they are still refusing to be silenced. How are Afghan women reclaiming spaces? I will explain in 4 topics. 1, underground activism inside Afghanistan. Inside the country, despite severe restrictions, women are organizing in small, often secret groups. They are running literacy classes, informal education centers, and civil disobedience campaigns, silent protests, and symbolic acts, like staying home from work or wearing the veil in protest rather than compliances, or brave and deliberate forms of resistance. Every day, Afghan women in exile stay connected to those inside, coordinating, exchanging information, and strengthening these underground movements. This quiet, coordinated defense is a powerful force. Number 2, Afghan women in diaspora. The Afghan women in diaspora, especially women, have become a crucial voice for those inside the country. They are raising global awareness, lobbying with the member states, influencing United Nations processes, and building platforms to amplify the voices of Afghan women. They are not observers, they are shapers to the international responses to Afghanistan. They are ensuring that Afghan women's rights stay on the global agenda. 3, digital resistance and storytelling. Social media has become a battlefield. Afghan women are documenting life under the Taliban rule, exposing the regime's propaganda and connecting across borders. In doing so, they are creating digital spaces that serve as both archives of resistance and tools for advocacy. These stories, raw, real, and courageous, keep the truth alive and prevent the erasure of the entire generation of Afghan women. 4, art, culture, and memory work. Through poetry, film, photography, and oral history, Afghan women are preserving cultural identity. They're resisting through beauty, memory, and storytelling. This creative resistance, both inside and outside the country, is not just about survival, but about shaping how Afghanistan is remembered and imagined. Afghan women are not passive victims. We are the real symbols of resistance. We are the survivor of this war on women. We are the legitimate opposition to the Taliban. And yet, despite all this, we continue to be excluded from negotiations, from conferences, from decision-making process about Afghanistan's future. Too often, when Afghan women are included, it's symbolic, a seat at the table, but no power, a name on a list, but no voice. What must be done to make inclusion meaningfully? 1. Shift from tokenism to power sharing. Afghan women must have real decision-making authority in any political negotiations, peace process, or international dialogue. Women must be selected by women, not handicapped by power actors. 2. Resources, local women-led initiatives, support grassroots women networks inside Afghanistan and in exile, fund them securely and directly, avoid over-reliance on international NGOs, trust Afghan women to lead their own solutions. 3. Ensure representation is diverse and grounded. Inclusion must reflect the ethnic, geographic, class, and generational diversity of Afghanistan, not just elites, not just diaspora. Rural women, young women, and those from marginalized groups must be also at the center. 4. Support education and economic resilience. Education and livelihood program inside Afghanistan and exile must be protected and expanded. Women's economic independence is not just survival, it's political resistance with long-term impact. 5. Demand accountability from the Taliban and international actors. The Taliban must be held accountable for their crimes against humanity. The UN, donors, and regional power must treat women's rights as non-negotiable. Statement of concern must be backed by consequences. 6. Foster solidarity networks. Connect Afghan women with global feminist and human rights movements. Let them be part of international protections, learning, and advocacy networks. Cross-border solidarity makes our voice harder to ignore. Afghan women don't need only visibility, but we need a power, protection, and partnership. We need space, not just to speak, but to lead. We need to be recognized as the architects of Afghanistan's future, not as the tokens of the past. It's our right to define what comes next for our country. This is not a symbolic issue. This is a matter of justice, peace, of humanity, and it's a joint responsibility. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wardak. And now I would like to invite Ms. Zakia Mohaqiq, a woman human rights defender, to deliver her speech. You have 5 minutes.
Your Excellencies, esteemed representatives of the states, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome. I thank you for your presence and your patience and attention and for being here today. Your efforts to listen to the pain and suffering of people who have endured so much are deeply appreciated. As an Afghan woman, whenever I prepare to speak, I quietly ask myself, where should I begin? Which pain do I name first? When every part of our story is marked by loss, injustice, and struggle. At times, I feel that simply repeating again and again what the Taliban have done to us, to our country, to our rights, freedoms, and dignity may no longer be enough. Words alone cannot stop this brutal and systematic violation of human rights in Afghanistan, unless they are followed by real action, by concrete steps toward restoring justice. These testimonies, no matter how painful or powerful, will remain unheard. It's only through actions that we can begin to stop this cruel erosion of Afghan lives, voice, and humanity. Throughout our life, we take on many responsibilities. Responsibility to learn, to grow, to work, to care for our families. But the greatest responsibility we share as human beings is to listen to the voice of our conscience and to act on the deep sense of duty we feel toward human values. The people of Afghanistan, especially women, have struggled for generations to claim their right to live with dignity, freedom, and their most basic human rights. They have sacrificed it and have continued to fight patiently and courageously. Today, the Taliban regime is enforcing gender persecution as a state policy. When Afghan women face violence in their homes, they have nowhere to go and seek help and protection. Not in the government, not in the society. They have nowhere to go and get help. The longer we remain indifferent to the violation of women's rights and human rights in Afghanistan, the harder it will be to undo the damage and fight against it. You know better than me. When discrimination and injustice become systematic, they eventually turn into culture and they become normalized. To the global community, to states, to human rights defenders, you know what apartheid means. You recognize its signs. So why, when it's happening so clearly in Afghanistan, has the world not called it by its name? This is apartheid. This is a gender apartheid. We know that the world is burdened with many wars and crises, but can that justify the silence in the face of such a large-scale systematic violation of human rights? As an Afghan woman, I have carried this pain in my soul. I have seen with my own eyes the injustice faced my people, especially women. 2 generations before me, my grandmother and my mother were both illiterate. They sacrificed their dreams and fought bravely so that we, their daughters and granddaughters, could attend school, receive an education, and imagine a different future. Should we allow several more generations of Afghan women and girls to remain illiterate and be deprived of their most basic human rights? And you ask us, what can we do for you? The answer is simple. Do what is right. In the struggle between justice and injustice, stand with justice. In the battle between the oppressor and the oppressed, stand with the oppressed ones. And lastly, if I don't raise this issue here today, I think my message will remain incomplete. As a Hazara woman from Afghanistan, I want to speak from the place of human responsibility I carry about something that has deeply broken my heart and wounded my spirit this past few months. For me and my people in Afghanistan, spring carries the scent of blood and ashes. It's season of mourning for us. Every year, during the spring and summer, the central Hazarajat regions, especially Behsud, my homeland, come under armed attacks by various armed groups. Backed by ethnic and political impunity from the Taliban, these groups have grown increasingly aggressive. For what crime they kill my people? The crime of belonging to a particular ethnic groups and religion. And while we speak here today, Hazara families in Behsud are losing their loved ones. Their homes are being looted, their fertile lands are being destroyed, their property is being stolen, and no one comes to help them. I speak to you today as a Hazara woman from Afghanistan. My ancestors were displaced by force from Behsud because of this oppression. This is not my words, but voice of thousands and millions of people from Afghanistan. Please raise your voice for them. Hold the Taliban accountable and help save the fate and life of millions from control of these groups. And put an end to this 133 years long genocide and oppression against Hazara people. Recognize the gender apartheid in Afghanistan and act as those who have the power to bring change. We believe that values such as human rights, women's rights, minority rights, freedom, and equality only hold true meaning when they are defended equally in every corner of this world for everyone. We continue to hope that one day words become actions and we will witness real changes in Afghanistan. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mhaqiq. We are now moving to Ms. Sajida CDP, whose testimony will offer critical insight into the human cost of oppression. Sajida John, your testimony today is a powerful act of courage. What do you hope policymakers and international bodies take away from the lived experience you are sharing, and what kind of support would make a real difference in your life and the lives of others like you? You have 5 minutes, please.
Hi and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Ms. Azizi. And thank you for being here with us today. I think that the policymakers and international body, they must use their power. They have to show an action, because it's the time for action. And also there is 5 things that they have to do. The first is that they have to call the crime by its true name. It's a gender apartheid. It's a genocide. If these words are, or you feel that these words are heavy, you can imagine that how much heavier our days of have been, or how much heavier the imprisonment of our sisters still is. Tie every dollar to freedom. Unconditional aid is a new chain around our necks, and every moment that you are silent, it's a green light for the next crime. Open the doors before we die. We need a safe visas. We need scholarships. We need a path to life, and let education cross borders. If we can't go to school, please bring us school. If the books are banned, we can use the screen of laptop. And if walls or if wall books blocks us, use internet. And also let's to survivors to be heard. How I don't know how they can make a decision without our voice. Any decision made for us without us, it's unacceptable. And what can truly change our lives? A global mechanism to document gender-based and ethnic-based crimes for the day justice arrives. And stand with us, not just during tragedies. The true solidarity is when the cameras are gone, but you are still there. On the day of the horrific attack on Court Educational Center, I rose from under the rubble, wounded and bleeding, amidst the lifeless and injured bodies of dozens. I still know whether that was a chance or a responsibility that I come out alive. Because when I come out from that class alive, it was I was not one person. I have the responsibility of dozens my sisters that I lost in that day. And in that day, time and the world stopped for me, not just because of that explosion, because of the silence after the explosion. Because when I was under the rubble and I called my friends, they didn't answer me. But we cannot reduce all Afghanistan only with the Kurd attack, because Kurd is one example of the hundreds of dozens systematic attacks that are happening in Afghanistan. And also among all the tragedies, the most painful and inhuman is the banning of girls' education by the Taliban. For 4 years, millions of Afghan girls have been denied the right to education simply because they are girls. And they are present in the silent corners of Afghanistan and waiting for a hope. It's unimaginable that in 21st century, women are imprisoned and silenced just because they are a woman, because they are girls. And this while in other corners of the world, the women are presidents. They are leading the countries. And now, when I am an Afghan girl, how can I hold onto hope, and who can speak to me for a brighter tomorrow. It's so difficult. And I ask to policymakers and international bodies that please, before any decision, please, before offering your opinion, for a few minutes, close your eyes and imagine your own daughters in shoes of Afghan girls, that they cannot go to school, they cannot anything, and also they are not allowed to feel their own humanity. And imagine that your own daughter, that when she has like 50 years or 70 years, she is in an attack. Why? Because she want to learning, she want to study. And I also remember that my school days in Afghanistan, that the other country was support us, and they built us a school, sent us book, and they was with us. But everything came to end, and Afghanistan, along with the dreams of its girl, fell into the dark pit of terror. We are truly tired. We are a generation that we are in pain. We are truly tired from the war, from the injustice, and from being deprived. I'm sure that in the future we will be remembered as a generation whose childhood was spent in war and explosion, whose youth was spent fighting for the rights we should have, but were taken from us. We are a generation that we have to choose between our life and our dreams, one of them. I choose my dreams, and because of that, I choose my dreams, but I paid for my dreams with my blood. But there in Afghanistan are girls that they are paying, or they are paid with their lives, dreams. And also I hope that never a girl has to choose between her dreams and her life. And also today I'm worried, and I fear for the future of children born to mothers who are uneducated, educated and deprived of learning. The children of tomorrow will fall victim to the ignorance of today. Uneducated mothers will raise a generation that may become prey to extremism. I want to say one thing very clearly, that the world must understand that if Afghan girls remain private of education, global security also will be at risk. The world must act today for the education of Afghan girls. I want to repeat it. The world must act today for the education of Afghan girls before a darker day than September 11 repeats itself in history. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sajida John, for delivering your testimony as a survivor. Now I would like to move to Ms. Parwana Najrawi as a protester and human rights defender. So Parwana John, as someone who has briefly protested on the streets and constantly raised your voice as a human rights advocate, what do you see as the most urgent gaps in the international community's response, and how can Afghan civil society, especially those in exile, better support the fight on the ground? You have 5 minutes, please go.
Thank you, Sajida John. It's a pleasure for me today and be here, and I can speak about our experience and carrying the experience and the goals of the women, especially the protester women in Afghanistan. And also, I'm so thank you about the special report, about the report, and it's so important and so strong report about the Afghanistan. And also, good afternoon, everyone. I want to start my speech. After the fall of Kabul in August 2021, the return of the Taliban to power, it was a dark day for people in Afghanistan, especially the women in Afghanistan. I remember that time, the 15th of August 2021, I and my colleague, we had a programs or conference about the Doha process and also the crimes of Taliban during the when the Taliban took the control of the province and the crimes happened in that province. And during my speech, one of my colleagues shouted that the Taliban came to Sangi of Kabul. And it's like a shocking for everyone that time because we couldn't believe that Taliban came to Kabul. And my colleague told us we should leave this program and went to our home. And when I arrived to street, I want to share a story here. I saw a lot of Taliban, and it's for me unbelievable that I saw the Taliban in the street of Afghanistan. And during this, I saw a mother with her child, and she tried to run away from the situation that time happened. She tried to run away, and the child of her said, "Mom, I couldn't escape in this time." And the mother told her, "If you don't escape, the Taliban kill us." And after that, I lost my everything, my hope, my country, and my motion. And it's so difficult for me that I speak about this issue and until now, I remember all of things, especially the face of that boy. And but that time, the women of Afghanistan, the protester women of Afghanistan, choose it's never be silent inside Afghanistan under the regime of Taliban, under the regime of a terrorist group in Afghanistan. The women of Afghanistan organized a protest against them. Against the Taliban regime, and 90 rules passed by the Taliban to systematically removing women in Afghanistan, injustice, gender apartheid. And those women also facing a lot of challenge inside Afghanistan, like violence, suffering, torture, punishment, and imprisonment. But the women just wanted justice and freedom. Finally, in Afghanistan, a bird is freer than a woman. And the Taliban also killing the men, especially the north of Afghanistan. I am one of the women who was harassed and tortured by the Taliban for standing up and for standing up against the injustice. I know better the situation women in Afghanistan, and it's over we see in the media and read in the reports. But I don't know why the international community is still silent. Is the blood color of Afghanistan woman different to another woman in the world? Or the Afghanistan woman not human? The international community not enough political pressure on the Taliban, not enough support for civil society, especially the women of Afghanistan, and no clear longer-term strategy and help the people of Afghanistan. Because of this problem, the world is no longer focused on Afghanistan. And civil society, I want to add this thing about the civil society. civil society in outside of Afghanistan can do, keeping the voice of Afghanistan women and men alive in international stage, doing strong advocacy for women's rights, human rights inside the country and outside the country together. Building network with the human rights group and media, and giving technical and practical help to activists inside Afghanistan, and work together inside and outside Afghanistan is very important in different times. And the hint I want to say what we want from the international community and from United Nations. Create an independent accountability mechanism. Recognize the gender apartheid as a crime against humanity. Support Afghanistan women and civil society for access to justice. And then I'm so happy that I'm here, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Parwana John, for sharing your history. Of course, these testimonies are often difficult, deeply emotional and painful, but they are essential to be heard. Also, I would like to take this opportunity to kindly call on the international community to continue supporting the mandate of the UN Special Rapporteur Richard Bennet, both politically and financially, to ensure the work of documenting violations, reporting and advancing accountability can continue. Thank you so much. So now the floor is open for Q&A. If there is any question, any intervention, please feel free to go ahead with your question.
Hello everyone, I wanted to ask the question if it has been explored, the whole operation and the misogynistic politics of the Taliban could be also held to account by resorting to the Convention on Slavery. Slavery against slavery. Thank you.
Is that a question to?
It was for you.
Well, as also my colleague said, all avenues need to run, right? We should explore whatever options are available. No stone should be left unturned. And perhaps I can add to the avenues that you mentioned, also the countries that whose courts have universal jurisdictions for crimes. That I think is also vastly underutilized. So that's definitely something to consider.
Any other questions?
Here, please.
Okay, yeah, please. Please go ahead with your question.
Sorry, I was just had a very important question. As you know that SR on violence against women, my question is for her. Do you have any plan to visit Afghanistan? Because all of us, we know that the Taliban, they banned Mr. Richard Bennet, the special reporter on for Afghanistan. So he's not able to go, but also it is only for SR. They didn't say it like it's for all. So do you have any plan to visit Afghanistan to know about the situation or visit closely the situation of women in Afghanistan?
So prior to becoming a special rapporteur, I've had the pleasure actually of living in Afghanistan for 2 years. And I think this is just an honor, but also allows me to really understand what is happening, even if I haven't been recently in Afghanistan. But some of you may know that in April 2022, and I'm very glad she's here, Mrs. Bandana Rana from the CEDAW committee and myself, we undertook a visit to Afghanistan. Granted, it was 6 months sort of after the Taliban took back power. It was a very enlightening visit. We, of course, also spoke to many interlocutors. We spoke to the de facto authorities. I think we were a bit more, I don't know if the word optimistic is the right word, but we were hopeful. I think that's perhaps a better word. Hopeful at the time that perhaps things may change. And then since then, I've tried to go back to Afghanistan, of course, in close coordination with my colleague and close discussions with him. I have explored possibilities more recently. I unfortunately have not heard back, but I would say that I don't sense so far a categorical no, which I think is good. Because as we agree, if unfortunately Richard cannot go, I think somebody from the special procedures should try to go.
Any other question?
I see no hand. Yes, please.
Thank you so much. I don't have a question. It's just a comment, mostly for the international community. And my name is Atal Ahmadzai, and I'm a regular commentator on Afghanistan issues. So the point that I want to take is what Richard Bennet said about for the international community, what to say and what not to say. And my focus is on what not to say, because these are not just semantics. These are having very instrumental implications for the regime as well as for the people of Afghanistan. And I will just come with two examples that those phrases or sentences are very frequent, especially in international language, and they have implications. For example, the first thing is, which is actually also mentioned here in this event a couple of times, that the Taliban's justice system, the Taliban weaponized justice system. Now, the justice system is, of course, it's a very complicated issue, like from legal perspective, all these things. But the question that we need to ask is whether Taliban really have a justice system. That is the question. When we are talking about justice system, what we're talking about mostly, at least we can reduce it to two elements. One is the rights of the people, and the second thing is just punishment. Do the Taliban have or recognize rights for the people, or is just punishment? So I think it's not a justice system. The term that we need to use is not a justice system. On the contrary, it is completely a punitive system, and the goal is simply oppression. How to oppress people, how to dominate people. And the second point is also related to the language of in international community, and that is that the Taliban violates the women's rights. So once again, I don't want to go to this very complicated discussion of relativity and absolutism of rights and human rights, all these things. But what is there is that when we're talking about human rights, whether that is women's rights or whoever, we are talking about at least two entities here. One is the bearer of those rights, and the second thing is the holders of those rights, and the second one is the bearer of those rights. And state is the bearer of those rights, and in very specific circumstances, that responsibility shifts to the international community. Now, the point here is when we are saying Taliban is violating women's rights, so the implicit implication is that they acknowledge some rights, but they violate some other rights. And that leads us to the discussion of relativity, which is going down a rabbit hole. They don't consider any rights for women. That is cut and dried. So what they're doing is, for women, they don't violate women's rights. What they do is they simply denounce and detach women from their personhood. That is it. It is beyond violation of women's rights. So I was having those two comments. Thank you so much, and I appreciate this event.
Yes, thank you. Who is your question addressed to? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So now refreshments are available. We will take 10 minutes break before starting our second panel. Thank you. See you in 10 minutes.
Sorry, I did not ignore your message. I don't know about
Because I'm your moderator. Mira, could you help me pronounce your name? Nazila? Damshi. Okay, So I wanted to also confirm how to introduce you. You had mentioned we wanted to keep it like that again. I know because I was reading about your profile and I was like, yes, the whole thing. What should I introduce you? Yeah. That's good. Our organization. We should talk about it. I should make a number Yeah, I understand. That's true. Everyone has Dr. Claire, I'm sorry. You're up. Yeah. But she's very focused. So I think you are. Our panel is the third. Oh, this is you can still relax. I'm sorry. No, it's okay. Please have a seat. And relax.
Well, it's so hard.
Come on, that's my job. It's okay. We will manage. We will manage. We'll get back on track. And for your I'm here. You were very focused.
Sorry, I'll move my battery. How's it going?
It's gone well, but in person, it's fine.
But I don't know if that would
Yes, that's the cute. Is my accent that bad?
Or you said Martin, like it, so.
This is not a name, it's Norwegian.
It's my uncle's called Martin, he's German, so.
Are you German as well?
Half German, half Dutch, yes.
I'm jealous of your, how do you call it? Probably the tricky one.
Yeah. We were just discussing that.
All right, everyone. We can go ahead and get started so as not to lose so much time. I am Dr. Melissa Kiovenda. I'm on the member of the board of directors of Shahmama organization, and I will be leading this panel on global solidarity and commitments. So we'll be hearing from these women's rights defenders about what they think has gone well and where we can see improvement with solidarity and commitments that have been given to them. I know this is somewhat been covered in some of the other panels, but we're going to really try to zero in on it. So today we have speaking Dr. Athena Amini, Idil Igdir, who will be joining us virtually, Alia Yilaz, Dr. Farkhunda Akbar, also you're Dr. Alia, sorry, Dr. Farkhunda Akbar, and Dr. Claire Somerville. And I'm going to start the first question with Dr. Athena Amini. Dr. Athena, What do you see as the major successes related to international advocacy for the rights of Afghan women and girls since 2021?
Good evening, everyone here. Since the Taliban's return to the power in 2021, the rights of Afghan women have faced extraordinary rollback. Yet in this crisis, the voices of Afghan women have not gone silent, and neither has the vote. In the next 5 minutes, I will highlight some achievement, and also I will highlight some strategies to improve this situation in the future. So the first success was continued non-recognition of the Taliban regime. A major success of Afghan advocacy effort is in that many countries and international bodies have refused to officially recognize the Taliban as legitimate government, citing their ongoing human rights violation, mainly against women and girls. Second, ongoing international humanitarian assistance. Despite the political confusion, humanitarian aid continued to reach Afghan community. Third, online education and digital platforms. A primarily important and innovative response has been the creation and expansion of online schools and virtual learning platforms. These have become vital tools for keeping girls and women connected to education, especially as formal schooling has been seriously restricted or banned for girls beyond year 6 in many, actually across the country. The fourth achievement is global visibility and continued hope among Afghan women. Afghan women and girls have not given up hope. They continue to resist, speak out, and advocate for the right to education, work, and freedom. Many still believe that international actors who once helped shape Afghanistan's future can help again. The global attention and solidarity they have received have sustained their courage and resilience. Their voices remain present in international forums, media, and policy discussion. The fifth achievement is advocacy campaign and coalition efforts. International women's rights advocates and Afghan advocates coalition board have successfully kept Afghan on the agenda in key diplomatic spaces in international level. This campaign have called for gender apartheid to be recognized as a crime under international law, advocate for sanction and accountability measures, pushed for tailored visa pathway and humanitarian protection for women at risk. So in the current environment under Taliban control, Afghan coalition, mainly those focused on women's rights, education, and civil society, faced extreme restriction, risk, and limitation. Here I mentioned some strategies that other speakers during past 3 days less mentioned about them. So first strategy is empowering Afghan community through education and capacity building. Sustainable coalition begin with empowered community. Education and skill building, especially for women and youth, are critical. The international community must pressure to the Taliban to allow NGOs and INGOs to deliver humanitarian and development work without interference. Focus on neutral, non-political education programs such as health training, language courses, and digital skills. Promote community-based informal learning where formal education is restricted. Second strategy is supporting online education platform and virtual learning. With formal education for girls largely banned, online school and virtual platform are vital tools for keeping girls and women connected to learning. Strategies including supporting safe, secure, and culturally appropriate e-learning platforms, offering access to basic and advanced education, vocational training, and leadership programs. The third strategy is advocating for free and reliable internet access nationwide. Internet access is essential for coalition building, learning, organizing, and staying informed. To support this, advocate for global internet providers such as Starlink to offer free or subsidized internet, especially in remote areas. Ensure secure, encrypted platform to allow safe communication access to information for activists and community. Push the protection of digital rights, including privacy and access to free information. Fourth, financial empowerment through women-led enterprise and ethical trade. Economic independence is crucial for Afghan women and coalition to remain resilient. Strategies include supporting the creation of textile design or handicraft cooperative and small scale factories, encouraging international fashion and retail brands to ethically source products made by Afghan women, offering sustainable employment. Partnership with global institutions to provide business training, seed funding, and market access for Afghan industrialists. The fifth strategy is link between in-country coalition and the Afghan-led. The Afghan-led plays important role ensuring visibility, advocacy, and external support. To make this coalition sustainable, create a cross-border coalition where Afghan-led members safely represent those inside Afghanistan. Use these networks for advocacy, resource sharing, and skills transfers. And finally, provide mentorship and solidarity initiative to strengthen connection between Afghan females. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Athena. Now we're going to hear from Dr. Farkhunda Akbari. She's a research fellow at Monash University. Dr. Farkhunda, your questions are 4 years on. How do you analyze the agency and advocacy of Afghan women's rights inside and outside of Afghanistan? And how can we best work together with legal, humanitarian, and diplomatic stakeholders to further our shared goals of strengthening international support for Afghan women and girls? That is to say, how can we promote cooperation between these stakeholders? So you have 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Thank you very much, Dr. Chavindi. Very grateful to be here. And I also like to pay my respect to the survivors of the Taliban atrocities in this room, and also want to send my love and care to them. I want to answer this question in a couple of points. First, I think you asked me 2 questions. First, the agency of Afghan women and their advocacy. I think in the last 4 years, we are seeing 2 types of advocacy: individual advocacy and also collective advocacy. And individual agency and collective agency. I think for individual level, we are seeing it day to day. My colleague, Ms. Wardak, already mentioned the type of agency that Afghan women have been practicing inside Afghanistan, be it putting their colorful dress on, going to a protest, not knowing whether they could come back home in the evening, or underground schools. And there has been so many that we have been seeing, or wearing their burqa and singing in their homes, in their rooms, imprisoned about the songs of freedom. And this has been our hopes really for us outside to keep going. And also individual advocacy on diaspora level, diaspora, exile, those of us who are outside of Afghanistan. Each one of us, I think none of us had a break in the last 4 years. We are tired, and each one of us, in whatever way. I'm very privileged because I was already settled in Australia, but I want to acknowledge my friends and colleagues who have been outside of Afghanistan and continuously advocating individually or collectively to do something to make a difference. And these are the tapestry of individual
agency of Afghan women that we have been seeing inside in its own format and outside. And on collective agency, I think I am so grateful to see the kind of work that we are doing today and what we have witnessed in the last 3 years in the Council. Collective agency emphasizes the power of group actions, solidarity among women to achieve a common goal. And this collective agency will drive for social change. And history has also showed that it is only through collective agency that systematic discrimination has been eliminated or targeted. Let's talk about South Africa. The recognition of racial apartheid in South Africa was not legal at that time. It was collective agency, people inside the country, people outside the country, and then the transnational advocacy of people who cared about human dignity, human rights, that made a difference, and their agency changed the law. So your work is very important to change the law legally, because we are the drivers of this change. I also want to make a point about what I am seeing as a researcher in the last 4 years about the paradox or the challenge and the criticism about women inside Afghanistan and women outside of Afghanistan. I have personally been to many meetings and I have been humiliated many times that I was told that you do not represent the women of Afghanistan. Because I have not lived in the country, which is acceptable. But I have also seen the very common mate to a woman human rights defender who have worked in Afghanistan for 45 years. And a woman from another country told her that you do not represent the women of Afghanistan because you're now outside. But she was a woman in exile. And the inside and outside paradox is it's very political. It's something that is used by stakeholders, by people from non-Afghans are telling us that you do not represent just because you're not there. I want to be there, but I cannot be there. My colleagues were there, but they were forced to flee the country. And today, we are connected. Every hour, every minute, we are receiving message, comments. We have family members at stake. We have survivors. We have my own family member. The last atrocity was against my own family, that 9 members were killed, including women and children. It was in 25th of November in 2022. And I'm being told that you can't talk about Afghan women because you're outside. And that the kind of message that is being pushed by the UN and so on who work inside the country. And they do not recognize that it's a political situation and women inside the country may not be able to talk about the situation of women. And we here outside, we are not advocating for mini skirts or for some wild Western idea of women's rights or in its own right, which is correct. We're talking about education. We are talking about employment. We are talking about women's accessibility and women's to justice and women's participation to political platforms that is going to make a change for the future of Afghanistan. Can we please, I want to emphasize that we understand this outside and inside woman dynamic in a way that we acknowledge that this woman outside is not talking for themselves. We can have our own life. We don't have to be in Geneva and going through all this trauma. It is a trauma to talk about Afghanistan. We are here to talk about it in our very personal times, just to echo the voices of our sisters. And we are hearing from our sisters inside the country and telling us that you are our only voice out there. Please say it. But then we have policymakers, NGOs, and so on telling us that, oh, you're outside. You can't represent. And this is heartbreaking. This needs to change. This is my very first criticism that really needs to change. And your question number 2 about transitional solidarity. Look, I already mentioned about South Africa, what ended to the collapse of the South African racial apartheid regime was international solidarity. International law by itself cannot make a difference if it's not backed politically by countries around the world. We know how Security Council is failing. Look at Palestine. Look at what's happening in Iran right now. Look at the arrogance of the international politics. And look at the human rights discourse out there. So we have to be very realistic about this. And transitional solidarity, this is our only hope. And in the last 4 years, I think the most, what I see, I think there's a few layers that I'm seeing in terms of international solidarity. There's symbolic politics that we are seeing. People like Angelina Jolie comes out and talks about Afghan women and use her platform to advocate. Symbolic politics, very important. Leverage politics, the ability to call on powerful actors by weaker actors like us who do not have state or so on, and that can make a difference because we are Afghan women leaders in the United Nations. Exactly, leverage politics is what we are doing. And then accountability politics. That's an effort to hold powerful actors to their previously stated policies and principles, and then look at them back, that how what are they doing, what they're saying, and then what they're doing. I think accountability politics is very important for us 4 years on. Everybody said that we care about Afghan women. How much has it changed? 4 years on, over 1,000 diplomatic engagement with the Taliban has occurred by regional actors, the UN, and internationally. Not a single edict has been reversed by now by the Taliban. And those diplomatic engagement did not work. What does it tell us? Hold them accountable. We need to go after them. We need to come much more strategically in this room to go after these actors and hold them accountable that these are not working, let's go next. Otherwise, I just want to give you a perspective. 4 years on in Afghanistan right now, 4 years of girls who have not been able to go to school or outside. I personally know many girls who have attempted to commit suicide. And I do not know how much longer the Taliban will be in power. Imagine another 10 years of them being in power. What is going to happen? Who are the leaders of the next generations of Afghan women? These are serious questions. As much as the world is in an alarming situation, but our situation is more alarming. If war is happening in different countries for months and weeks, we have been at war for over 48 years, continuously. And the woman in this room who comes from Afghanistan, in one way or another, everybody have wounds in their bodies. And they're numbed to see that nothing's happening in international level. How else it could be alarming for us? I think we just need to, thank you for coming here, thank you for solidarity, but I think we need to go to another level. We need actions. We need to break down much more and see what can we do much more practically. Otherwise, it is a failure for each one of us who would care about women's rights to see what is happening in Afghanistan today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Farkhanda. Now we will hear from Dr. Alia Yilaz, who's the Executive Director of Lajawarduli. And actually, I think her question builds in a very important way on Dr. Farkhanda's point that she made. So when we're thinking about coalition building techniques between activists, experts, right defenders, academics, when reaching out to governments, civil society, and human rights organizations, what can we do to make sure these coalitions are sustainable and ongoing? And so I think we could think about that as what can we do to make sure these coalitions are sustainable, become solidarity, and then become that further than solidarity, that action that was just called for.
Everyone, good afternoon. Thank you for your time. My speech is about the reasons behind the failure of coalitions in Afghanistan, especially political coalitions. The history that shaped these failures and the possible strategies we need for a better and more stable future. In Afghanistan, most coalitions have not been based on shared values or long-term plans. They were mostly created because of short-term interests, fear of insecurity, or pressure and push from outside powers. These types of coalitions often repeat the same mistakes because of a lack of open dialogue. Too much central power, ethnic exclusion, and deep wounds from the past that have never been healed. One of the biggest problems is that there is no clear agreement on what nation or legitimate government really means. Since there is no shared national story, different groups often look to the past in different and opposing ways. They are not building a common future, but instead repeating old divisions. Also deep mistrust among leaders. The political use of ethnic difference and secret deals instead of open participation have stopped people from trusting the system. Some common mistakes in past coalition include ignoring the real needs of the people, not having clear and open decision-making, excluding people from political processes, and being unfair in how power and resources are shared. Many coalitions only focus on dividing power among a few actors, instead of creating an inclusive plan for the country. To move forward, we need to take the following steps. First, agree on shared values like justice, inclusion, and equal rights for everyone. Second, create open and fair systems where all voices are heard and political decisions. Third, support national conversation that connects people across languages, ethnic groups, and regions, focusing on a shared future. Fourth, keep coalitions independent from foreign interference, which often causes more problems among the Afghan people. Fifth, empower civil society, especially women, youth, and all minorities that Afghanistan consists of, who are key building to trust and balance in society. Coalitions can only last if they grew into real political institutions, not just temporary solution in a crisis. If we want to help Afghanistan move towards peace and stability, we must build a path based on political ethics, unity, and strong, lasting institutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alia. So now I have a question for Dr. Claire Somerville, who's the Executive Director of the Gender Center at the Geneva Graduate Institute. So Dr. Claire, what do you see as the major challenges faced by those who are working on international advocacy for Afghan women and girls?
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation and to the organisers and the other panellists here this afternoon. It's an honour to share this space and time with you. I speak not as a legal scholar nor as an expert on Afghanistan in any way. There are many more qualified people in the room with lived experiences to speak on this. I speak as a researcher, both in the field of gender in international affairs and political negotiations and gender in global health. And I have a particular concern to ensure that the role of civil society, activists, researchers, and institutions of education, universities of which I am a part, and our student bodies around the world can and should play in political and diplomatic dialogues, in solidarity with women and girls who are experiencing multiple and intersecting discriminations. My recent research here at the Human Rights Council and in other multilateral dialogues in Geneva have closely examined the unfolding and deepening gender politics in some of these negotiations and the escalation of violences against women and girls across the world. From the global shadow pandemic of COVID-19 to Gaza, Sudan, Iran as well, and examined the ways in which gender has been instrumentalized at times in international negotiations and the negative impacts that this has on the pursuit of gender justice for all women and girls. So it's with this lens that I make a few tentative observations. First is a general one. The multilateral system, as we all know, faces some really significant challenges right now. There are many reasons, most of which are geopolitical in nature and beyond the scope of this afternoon's discussion, but have, I've argued before, instrumentalized at times gender and the rights of women and girls as issues that have polarized and stalled dialogues. I observed how gender and the rights of women and girls have become a currency in international negotiations, disputed, traded, and instrumentalized as a lever of negotiation on trade, the right to development, health, social, economic, and cultural rights, and many other issues. Gender is, of course, political, but the shape of some of the current polarization in international negotiations is troubling. Some describe it as backlash. It matters not what we call it, but what it is doing on the ground to the rights of women and girls and gender justice for all, including men and boys. We must form solidarity transnationally, and I believe that the sites of education, universities, and our student bodies should be active in pursuing and ensuring that these networks of solidarity remain. Second, there are significant consequences of the attack on multilateralism, not least the defunding, which has now been felt across the multilateral settings, but has for quite some time been impacting the work of civil society and women's groups across the world, and specifically in Afghanistan. We must act to stop the targeted defunding of women's groups, grassroots and community actions, and more globally, the international institutions that support women's health, access to justice, economic empowerment, and political participation. Furthermore, the attacks on multilateralism attempt to undermine the credibility and legitimacy of the very mechanisms that women and girls can channel to address the systemic de facto authorities' gender persecution. The work of the Special Rapporteur, his research and the research and advocacy that documents the processes and consequences of the erasure of women from public spaces and public life must continue to ensure that an evidence base to pursue all avenues of redress, and box as Mr. Bennet proposes, the pursuit of the legal codification of the crime of gender apartheid, and the pursuit of universal jurisdiction as a multi-avenue strategy from the international community. This means that countries can prosecute crimes against humanity committed in other countries by non-citizens of that country. Switzerland actually did this in 2023 when it prosecuted in the Swiss Federal Criminal Court the commander of a Liberian militia and sentenced him to 20 years of imprisonment for crimes against humanity. This opens the way for further such trials. Thirdly, we must never lose sight of the core values and principles that are so central to a human rights approach to gender. It must be victim-centered. It must foreground the voices and lived experience of women and girls in all of their diversities, contexts, and places, and all gender minorities whose voices have been structurally erased. And it must never instrumentalize these injustices as part of international diplomatic tradecraft. Women and girls and all gender minorities are not negotiable and not tradable. Finally, the aim of this panel was to strengthen multi-stakeholder coordination, commitment, and action alongside the women and girls of Afghanistan, civil society, diplomatic, and the international mechanisms. We've redoubled our commitment from the academic world, from institutions, universities, and engaged scholarship, and students who have the privilege of academic freedom to continue to talk, advocate, and critically engage in research that contributes to gender justice for all in Afghanistan and across the world. We act in solidarity. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Claire. So our last speaker is going to be joining us virtually today. She is Idil Igdir from the Global Human Rights Defense. And she'll be speaking to the first question that we asked as well, relating to the major successes of international advocacy for the rights of Afghan women and girls since 2021.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can all hear me, first of all. Yes. Hello. I would like to start with thanking you on behalf of Global Human Rights Defense for the opportunity to speak on a matter that demands not just our collective attention, but our collective action. It is an honor to address this panel today, one grounded in the theme of global solidarity and commitments. Since the Taliban's return to power in August 2021, we have witnessed regression, the dismantling of decades of progress, and the systematic erasure of women from public life. Afghanistan has now become the only country in the world where women are almost entirely excluded from public and economic life, and when girls are banned from secondary and higher education. But what we are witnessing here today, actually what Afghan women and girls are witnessing today, is not simply a repression, it's an erasure. The Taliban have issued at least 54 edicts targeting women, abolished the Ministry of Women's Affairs, restricted their freedom of movement, access to healthcare and employment, while overlooking domestic abuse and forced marriages without legal recourse. In less than 3 years, Afghanistan has fallen to the bottom of every global index for women's rights and security. These abuses are not cultural, they are political, intentional, and indirect violation of international human rights that we are trying to promote, protect, and uphold. Yet, Afghan women are not passive victims. They are resilient resistors. From clandestine schools and online education initiatives to underground activism and international advocacy, Afghan women are risking everything to protect what remains of their agency. Civil society organizations, both within and beyond Afghanistan borders, have adopted to deliver services, advocacy, and hope. The Afghan diaspora, particularly women activists, have taken to global stage, organized hunger strikes, and pressure institutions to call this crisis what it is, a deliberate campaign to relegate and maintain women as secondary citizens. But despite the persistent darkness, advocacy efforts have had both immediate and long-term positive impacts. Well, long-term positive impacts can be a question. International courts and bodies here at the UN have begun recognizing Taliban policies as forms of persecution, particularly under CEDAW and the Refugee Convention. The European Union and other such regional forums have taken steps to align their humanitarian, legal, and diplomatic responses to these violations. For instance, in 2024, European Parliament adopted a resolution on the deteriorating situations of women in Afghanistan due to the recent adoption of the law on promotion of virtue and prevention of vice. With this resolution, the Parliament called on the EU, its member states, and other donors to give more humanitarian aid to meet basic needs, support Afghan civil society, and help NGOs and their female workers. It also urged them to provide humanitarian and promised visas to Afghanistan to Afghans who work with the international coalition. The Parliament stressed that the international community should examine how the recent decree affects humanitarian efforts. But we all know that this is not enough. The efforts are ongoing and need to persist. We need urgent, concrete, and coordinated commitments to bring this systematic oppression to an end. This means increasing direct support for Afghan women's organizations that are still operating under extreme conditions. It means expanding legal pathways for Afghan women, human rights defenders, journalists, students, and all involved and affected stakeholders. It means leveraging international legal mechanisms such as the ICC to hold perpetrators accountable for systematic abuses, including gender-based persecution and gender apartheid. All such efforts to have the desired impact and need to consciously place Afghan women at the center and not just as an afterthought. There is also a need to align our long-term strategic goals. As documented and stressed in GHRD's recent reports on periodic review of women's rights in Afghanistan, education cannot wait. Investment in alternative education system to reach girls and women must be developed and sustained. Economic empowerment is crucial as well. Access to opportunities and skill development must be identified. Legal empowerment through local traditional justice system, regional bodies, and through international tribunals must also be initiated and maintained. Our role here on this panel today is not to reiterate what must be done, but how we can do it, but pledging to ensure that our commitments and ideals turn into actions. It is our duty to ensure that the rights of Afghan women and girls are protected, not as a footnote to our collective effort, but as a generational responsibility. It is our duty as human beings to champion this cause, to reject the idea that is solely an internal issue for Afghanistan, and to challenge oppressive regimes which operate on the notion that women's rights are negotiable and optional. So what I would like to underline here is that let our goal today be policy, let it be advocacy, let it be education. Funding, visibility, consensus. Let us remind Afghan women and girls that they are not optional, that their rights are not negotiable, and their voices are a symbol of peace, progress, and justice. Let us do our part, and if I may say, GHRD is ready for its part. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adil. So now we have a few minutes for any questions for any of our panelists that somebody might have.
Do you want to just move forward?
Never mind. Maybe at the very end we can put all the questions together then. Yeah. Okay.
Everyone's like, too long.
We want to make sure we have enough time for the panelists. Can we please come down for a little bit? Thank you. Okay, I'm going to get the panel started. My name is Mira Naik, and I'm with the Center for Human Rights Advocacy, and I welcome you to this final panel for justice and accountability. We appreciate your commitment to being here and your patience. I know it's been a long day, and we thank the esteemed panelists. It's a great honor. So first, I welcome member and former vice chair of the UN CEDAW Committee, Ms. Bandana Rana. From your perspective as a CEDAW Committee member, what are your expectations for the upcoming review of Afghanistan next week? And what can meaningful next steps look like? And how can the international community, including civil society, effectively follow up on the recommendations?
Thank you. Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for organizing this very, very important discussion, particularly, just before the upcoming CEDAW dialogue and review on Afghanistan next week on 24th June. So this is extremely helpful and insightful. And before I say any further, I would also like to take this opportunity to salute the incredible resilience and courage of Afghani women, demonstrated by the testimonials that was presented here, and also the lived-in experiences of Afghani women inside Afghanistan. So I really feel they have incredible resilience and power, which I can't imagine, under the circumstances, they still have hope, So, and of course, we should not lose hope. So having said that, the purpose of the questions that's been directed to me is to focus more on the upcoming CEDAW dialogue and review, and why we planned it, how we planned it, what do we expect, and what are going to be the next steps in terms of building a stronger coalition and collective efforts to address the dire situation. As a long-standing member of the CEDAW Committee and someone deeply engaged in the struggles for women's rights in conflict and post-conflict contexts, particularly in Asia, I approach this upcoming CEDAW review and dialogue on Afghanistan with both a deep sense of responsibility and urgency. This moment is not simply a procedural step. It is a crucial act of solidarity and accountability for the women and girls of Afghanistan who have been silenced and stripped of their rights. As many of the previous speakers have said, accountability is central. And in this regard, I just want to share a little bit of background. As soon as the takeover of the Taliban, the CEDAW Committee was concerned about the situation because, as you know, most all the issues, in fact, is related to girls and women's rights, and CEDAW would be the right treaty to address this. Though our hands were restricted, tied, we did form a special task force in Afghanistan within the committee to monitor the situation and explore ways of how we could best engage and address the situation. And as Reem mentioned earlier, we were able to visit Kabul, Reem and myself, in 2022 April. It wasn't called an official visit as such, but it was a technical visit. But we had the opportunity to visit. We were the first mandate holders, I think, to visit Kabul after the takeover. And we had the opportunity to visit, to meet with certain de facto authorities, as well as women working on the ground. At that time, they were still working through kind of a facade, but they were still there. And I do recall, as Reem also mentioned in an earlier intervention, I do recall the de facto authorities at that time, because we didn't know what to expect. We were expecting the worst. But our conversation with them was, this is an interim situation. We're working for the better of it, for women and girls' rights. Those were the issues we brought up, education, mobility. And as Reem also said, we were hopeful. But then, of course, the situation deteriorated completely after that, with the senseless hope kind of issue. However, we felt that we needed to engage with the de facto authorities too, not to embolden them, encourage them, or empower them, but with the intention of holding them accountable, because as we have said in our conversations, that accountability is key. So that was the intention. And I must say that we did send them in earlier 2023. We had sent them a list of questions in terms of what are their responses to the situation of women and girls, particularly on the basis of the last concluding observations. We had a dialogue on Afghanistan in 2020 February. I was the rapporteur then also, and issued the concluding observations in March. So it was on that basis we sent them a list of questions. With a lot of persistence, they did respond to those questions, which we listed as additional information from the de-factos. You can find it in the website. It's not very insightful, but at least there was some level of engagement. Again, as I said, with the intention of building accountability. Now, in the process of this dialogue, this upcoming dialogue, why the dialogue? There may be some arguments. Why do we want to have a dialogue? In the absence, the normal CEDAW dialogues are with member states, where the CEDAW committee members identify or point out the gaps in the implementation of the CEDAW compliance, and hear the responses from the state parties in defense or admitting or expecting or acknowledging the gaps, and on the basis of which we draft a set of recommendations for the next 4 years for that particular country. So in this case, this is a very, very unusual dialogue we are having. We don't have a member state. But we felt that after the UPR process, where there was a dialogue on Afghanistan, perhaps the door has opened for a treaty body, particularly in this regard, CEDAW, to explore ways of drawing attention to the situation of women and girls through our mandate, which is like holding a dialogue. So it was in that regard, and I'm thankful and grateful to the Geneva mission of Afghanistan. We collaborated, we consulted, and we requested them to send us a report which was inclusive, involving all stakeholders, including Afghanistan, diverse Afghanistan women inside and outside Afghanistan, which we did receive this, we call it now the State Party report, but we did receive the report. And that's the basis for the dialogue. But if you go to the website, you will also see there are around 16 or 17 shadow and alternative reports, because this was an open process that could be submitted, and we have received those reports as well. So our intention, again, is to build accountability, draw attention, but the dialogue will be a kind of a little bit different, because it will not be a question pointing out gaps and then the delegation responding to it, because the delegation that is going to be there for the dialogue is not the one responsible for the implementation of inside Afghanistan. But we hope we are still planning. And another fact that I wanted to share with you over here is we attempted to engage with the de-factos. We didn't want them to be completely left out of the picture, the entire picture, at least to inform them that we are having this dialogue. And if they want, they can send us additional information as a follow-up to the previous information that they had sent to us. It's not a report, but it's additional information. And we did send a list of guided questions for that through our OHCHR Asia desk. As of today, we have not got any response from them. But we attempted, again, on the centrality of accountability. So that is the scenario of the dialogue that's going to take place on 24th next week. Now that I know there were some specific questions, so let me go back to the questions now. So despite the current political reality, Afghanistan remains a state party to CEDAW. That legal status does not change with regime shifts. It means the de facto authorities are still bound by international obligations to eliminate all forms of discrimination against women. The committee's review will reflect this unwavering legal and moral stance. The committee will carefully examine the situation through the lens of systematic and institutionalized gender-based discrimination, which some experts and advocates and the speakers here have described as amounting to gender apartheid. The committee hopes to respond with clear, robust recommendations to the de facto authorities maybe the mission in Geneva, and international community reflecting on the unprecedented rollback of women's rights in Afghanistan. So this will be a different set of concluding observations, addressed to multi-stakeholders who are engaged in this process. We will be guided by the voices of Afghan women, those that we heard today as well, both within and outside the country, and we hope that their testimonies and lived experiences will be central to the review process. The review serves three critical purposes. First, it is about visibility and voice. Afghan women and girls have been pushed out of public life from schools, workplaces, and decision-making spaces. Through this dialogue, their realities, many conveyed to us through brave civil society actors, are brought to the international stage and into the heart of our deliberations. Second, it reinforces accountability. The committee will scrutinize violations across all 16 substantive articles, from education and employment to health, legal status, family life, and protection from violence. These are not isolated acts. They represent a system of institutionalized gender discrimination, which on many occasions described by many as a situation similar to gender apartheid. Third, it provides a framework for collective action. CEDAW complements other mechanisms, special procedures, the Human Rights Council, and humanitarian agencies, but it offers something unique, a comprehensive, legally binding, gender-focused roadmap for addressing the full scope of violations. So the next steps must go beyond rhetoric. They should include formal recognition and documentation of the widespread, structural, and gender-specific human rights violations against Afghan women and girls as potentially amounting to gender persecution and gender apartheid under international law, targeted recommendations to the de-facto and all stakeholders that address the systemic exclusion of women from education, employment, public life, and access to justice, and that push for the restoration of fundamental freedoms, concrete benchmarks for progress, such as the reopening of girls' secondary schools and universities, reinstatement of female civil servants, and the revocation of discriminatory decrees, which can be used to monitor compliance. Greater protection for women human rights defenders, including through strengthened asylum pathways and political support for those in exile. While specific recommendations will emerge after the dialogue within 2 weeks, what we need now is collective and coordinated engagement. Governments, UN agencies, and civil society must use CEDAW's concluding observations as a shared framework to guide advocacy, diplomacy, and aid, also referencing them in bilateral and multilateral diplomatic engagements with all relevant stakeholders, including the de-facto authorities and donor governments. Ensure that CEDAW's recommendations remain on the agenda of the Human Rights Council, the Security Council, and other relevant forums. Humanitarian and development responses must be rooted in rights-based and gender-sensitive approaches, avoiding normalization of the discriminatory status quo. And crucially, Afghan women inside and outside the country must be supported and protected in their efforts to speak, organize, and advocate. And in closing, I believe the upcoming dialogue is not just about evaluating obligations. It is about reclaiming space for women's agency, dignity, and future, which Richard referred to earlier as well. And the CEDAW committee stands ready to work with all stakeholders to ensure that the rights of Afghan women and girls are not forgotten, but fiercely defended with every tool international law can provide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rana, for your remarks. Now I welcome social justice professional, Ms. Nazila Jamshidi.
Good afternoon, everyone. I really like this title. I identify a lot of things, but I truly love this one. And I believe I'm a social justice person by education and profession. And I'm so proud to spend years and years of my life for promoting the elements of social justice, including DEI, which has become such a dangerous thing in my own home country, the United States. So as a social justice person, I have spent years to advocate on survivor-centered justice and accountability, and mainly because it really placed the voices and dignity and needs of survivor and victim of the violence, especially in the context of Afghanistan women and girls, at the heart of any legal, social, regional, and institutional global response to the harm. And it's not just about briefly punishing the perpetrator of the violence, but it should be, and it is, and it should be about creating kind of a system or systems that are safe, inclusive, and healing, and especially preventing the repeating the cycle of violence in a country. And I especially like this survivor-centered justice because this is a kind of a model that ensures the survivor lead the process. Something nowadays we observe by Afghan women in the campaign of codification of gender apartheid and some other campaigns that are going on. And also, it's about the Afghan women, or especially the survivor. It's them to tell their story by themselves, to talk about how the justice would look like for these people and how they wish to rebuild their life after the harm. And it's especially important on our work for Afghanistan for many reasons. And I talk about very briefly about 3 reasons. So first of all, when we talk about Afghanistan, we talk about a place where gender-based violence and structural exclusion of women and ethnic minorities is getting normalized in the context of the country. We talk about a kind of a ruling system that intentionally and systematically oppress women only because of their gender and sex. And that's why it's really, really important in the context of Afghanistan. And that means we need to take different avenues to amplify first, to amplify the lived realities of women and girls in various places of Afghanistan, because it can be vary from one place to another, and pay careful attention to intersectionality of these experiences. And this means we need to ensure that international aid, legal redress, and a support system are responsive to the survivor trauma, past experiences, injustices that they have gone through, and of course their agency. And we need to do this, and I should stress a lot on this. We really need to do this with a lot of cultural and experiential humility. And by that I mean by any means, we cannot assume that we understand enough experience and culture of other people. And this is a continuous learning. This is a really a learning process, and something we need to follow with a lot of curiosity and openness. And the second reason that this is very important in our work on Afghanistan is because I don't think in the past few years, the international community response to the causes of Afghan women and to the situation that Afghan women have been facing has been fully survivor-centered approach. But I'm glad nowadays there is this growing awareness and advocacy on that. The other day I heard Richard Bennet talking about it a lot in one of these events, and I hear Afghan women are stressing on this approach a lot nowadays, which is great. Sure, there have been a lot of efforts to spotlight the human rights violation and impose a sanction. Aid condition and so many other efforts that have been taken. I'm so grateful for all and every single of these efforts. But much of these responses has been focused on very high-level diplomacy and humanitarian relief, rather than supporting direct voices and needs of Afghan women survivors on the ground and, of course, in exile, because they are still the survivor and victim of the violence. And shameful example of that was seen in Doha 2 and Doha 3. So the third reason is that a survivor-centered approach would help us to prioritize co-designing programs with Afghan women. It helps us to do nothing without having their voice in it. And when I'm saying Afghan women, I really want everyone to recognize and respect that diversity exists among the groups of Afghan women. And this is something need to be appreciated, respected, and recognized. So this survivor-centered approach would also help us to effectively funding these grassroots women-led organizations. I understand Afghanistan, there have been a lot of advocacy and a lot of demand for supporting grassroots women-led organization, but this survivor-centered approach would help us to do it effectively and to do a lot of other effort regarding protecting educational, financial, and legal access for women and girls who are fleeing the prosecution. And we understand that in the last few years, many funding channels have been inconsistent, and many of them are blocked now, unfortunately. And some aid delivery has been filtered through a lot of systems that excluded or silenced the survivor. So I think the powerful example of survivor-centered justice is the documentation and the support work being by my fellow Afghan women living in exile. And one very good and beautiful example of it is all the testimonial and narrative and story that are being collected by my friends and my fellow Afghan women to strengthen the codification of gender apartheid campaign. And I love this campaign because this is so organic, this is absolutely beautiful. And I see Afghan women from every corner of the world doing a lot of work, anything they can to strengthen this campaign. So, I mean, all this work has been good, but not really enough. We need to place them at the heart of every response that we as international community, as global organization, take to respond to the harm. And thank you.
For your remarks on survivor-centered justice and accountability. And now next, we have Miss Alaha, a survivor who is joining us online from Pakistan, a voice of courage. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be here. And thank you to the organizers of this conference. First, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Alaha Hussein, a 15-year-old girl living in exile in Pakistan. Should I continue?
Yes, please continue.
It is an honor to stay here and to be among you all. I'm here today to not just speak for myself, but to raise the voices of millions of girls and women of Afghanistan who continue to resist, survive, and hope even as the world seems to have forgotten them. I come from a small, beautiful town in Johor, where girls once walked to school with laughter in the air and dreams in our hearts. I was in 7th grade. I still remember the pride I felt wearing my school uniform, hugging my book clothes. I dreamed of becoming a pro chain maker. But in 2021, the sky fell. When the Taliban returned, suddenly everything changed overnight. Girls like me were banned from school. Our teachers were walked away just as our classrooms. Our voices were labeled shameful, and our very presence was seen as a threat. But even as the world around me collapsed, something inside me refused to break. With my two sisters, I began to resist, not with weapons, but with words, courage, and hope. I started taking photos and making videos to show the world what was happening, and even as the fear lived in every corner of our homes, we continued for a brighter, clear future. Then came the unthinkable. On February 11, 2022, my older sister, our only brother, was arrested by the Taliban from a safe house in Kabul, along with 29 other women's rights activists. At the time, my two other sisters and I were in another safe house, so we keep changing our location to stay safe. But on March 27, 2024, the Taliban found us. They arrested my two sisters, my brother, and me. We were taken to the Ministry of Interior, and we were almost there for nearly a week. For no time, just accept that we were Hazara, girl, and dare to speak for our rights. But they used various forms of torture, mocking our ethnicity and calling us infidels and saying that we did not belong to Afghanistan. The trauma of this case still haunts me, and I can never forget or forget the way that they treated my siblings and me, or how they casually spoke about our deaths. This all was my background. And now in Pakistan, life is still uncertain and landscape for many refugees and women's rights activists, journalists, and many other people. People in here face legal insecurity, fear of deportation, poverty, and many other issues. And even several months ago, my family and I were almost deported to Afghanistan. But I haven't stopped. Here I teach my mother and friends English, basic English, because even the schools are shut. Learning must continue in our hearts and our homes. And recently, after many years, I enrolled in an online school because as a refugee, I cannot attend school in Pakistan. I'm so excited to be learning again, but my heart aches for millions of girls back home. In Afghanistan today, girls are banned from education, women are stripped of freedom, and the world remains largely silent. Though I am no longer in Afghanistan, but my heart never left. I hear these stories every day. Girls cry in silence as they watch their brothers walk to school. Women who were once the symbols of progress are now in hiding or in prison, just simply preparing to exist. Even walking outside without a male escort is punishable, and most recently, the Taliban banned women to speak to other women. Isn't it gender apartheid? Is this a regime that the world is willing to accept? Recognizing this regime means erasing the very meaning of human rights. In Afghanistan today, it is no longer a political crisis. It is a crisis of human dignity. As a young human rights defender, my futures and my family are at a serious risk. We urgently need safe relocation for refugees and here, journalists, women's rights activists, and many other people in danger. Access to education, internet, and health support. Legal protection so that we can live without fear and with dignity. But I'm not just speaking for myself.
We lost connection, but we thank Ms. Alaha for her essential remarks. And next, I will turn to International Legal Advisor with the Global Accountability Initiative at the ICJ, Ms. Raquel Saavedra. What has been the progress in the advocacy so far to help ensure the establishment of a gender-responsive, independent investigative mechanism for Afghanistan? And why is such a mechanism so important? What do you recommend for effective next steps ahead? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Naik. And also, I wanted to thank everybody who's in this room, but of course, most of all of the Afghan women, men, persons of LGBTQIA+, human rights defenders who take their lives in their hands when they're doing this work. I come not just as a representative of the International Commission of Jurists, I also come as a lawyer in solidarity with you all who are doing this work, wanting to make sure that all of the work that you do is going to the efforts that you are trying to make, making sure that we're getting accountability, we're ensuring perpetrators are not getting away, that impunity is broken, that cycles of this are broken, that the truth of what's happening is established. And for that, there are various things that we need additionally, which we've emphasized, but I want to put a finer point on some of them so we can also understand when we call for an independent investigative mechanism, what does it need to contain? Because first recommendation, it's time for a resolution, and we need to start talking about functions. The resolution that was tabled in October set the political and legal groundwork for that, but it stopped short of establishing the mechanism itself. So let's talk about now, tabling a resolution and what do the functions need to be? How do we ensure that it's gender responsive, survivor-centered, trauma-informed? How do we ensure it's part of this all systems approach that the Special Rapporteur has talked about already? So just to respond for the first question, of course, where are we right now in advocacy? So October we had this resolution, which I mentioned, stopped short of establishing a mechanism. Despite the fact that civil society has been calling for a mechanism for at least 3, but been talking about it, pushing for more accountability for 4 years at least. And I'm not talking about a few organizations. I'm not talking about just some international CSOs working alongside some Afghan CSOs. No, I'm talking about more than 100 organizations across the board who have been calling for the same thing. So it's time to go to that next step. And we have lots of precedents also to get us there. Understandings about how we can make this mechanism, which should be established not only as a moral obligation, but also a legal obligation. We also have an understanding based on precedents, what it can look like, make sure that it's gender responsive, because what we're dealing with here, as has been emphasized time and time again today, we're looking at something that is not adequately defined in international law. We're looking at gender apartheid. We're looking at something we haven't seen before. It's something worse than what we've seen before in relation to discrimination against women. So how can we ensure that the legal system, what we have, but also where we need to go with it, tackles this? And how does a mechanism fit into all of this? Okay, so why is it urgent? Why am I saying no more delays? Why is it urgent? Okay, from a lawyer's perspective, understanding what it means to get these court cases off the ground. When we say that evidence, a day without evidence preservation means that justice will be denied, that's the fact of the matter. When evidence is lost, cases do not succeed. And of course we have testimony, and the testimony is the lifeblood of a lot of these cases, but we need far more than that. We need physical evidence, we need medical evidence. And who's doing all of that documentation? Civil society, because international organizations don't have access to the territory of Afghanistan. So this is going to play into what I talk about in relation to what a mechanism also needs in this instance. So in relation to the ecosystem and how does the mechanism fit into this ecosystem, we have the SR's office, we have work by the International Criminal Court, of course, we have the International Court of Justice and a potential pending case before the International Court of Justice. We also have various efforts, although I agree with the previous speaker that universal jurisdiction hasn't yet been fully capitalized upon. But what we don't have within this ecosystem is a body that serves as the connective tissue between each of these bodies. We don't have a body that can investigate to a criminal law standard, which again, you need that criminal law standard to be able to stand up in a court of law. So if we want criminal convictions, we need that. But obviously, if it's documenting to a criminal law standard, that's also going to serve purposes of everything else because it's a higher standard. It will also serve purposes of truth-telling, say if there's a truth commission at some point. It will also serve processes of reparations if we should and hopefully see some form of a victims fund for reparations at some point. In addition, we need the collection, preservation, and analysis of that evidence. We don't have right now the infrastructure to preserve the evidence. Again, killer for criminal cases, killer for cases over the long term. We need a system to preserve it. We also need the analysis itself. Analysis does take a team working together. And I'm not just talking about a few international lawyers. I'm talking about international lawyers can't do this job without Afghan lawyers also equal partners in that. So again, I'll speak more about just the mechanism and what it's should look like if we want to make it work. So it was also mentioned already on this panel that a mechanism, in addition to those different functions that I just named, also must be survivor-centered, must be gender responsive, trauma-informed, it must be child-sensitive as well. But what does that mean in real terms? In a resolution, of course, we need to ensure that there is a paragraph for that. But when we talk about implementation, what we've learned from previous work with the different mechanisms is this is not done sufficiently, despite the fact that this is contained in the resolutions. What we need is that these mechanisms are required to, one, sign MOUs with civil society that is doing documentation work, ensuring that they have the infrastructure and resources dedicated to victim and witness protection, ensuring that they're helping those who are documenting, for example, if they need to flee the country. Well, they're going to help them also with those processes related to immigration. Lastly, they need to not just help existing processes of justice, they need to seek out those processes of justice. When we talk about universal jurisdiction cases, to get one of those off the ground, it takes an enormous amount of resources and push. It's not that states volunteer to do these cases, never. It's always going to be civil society. And civil society right now shoulders the burden 100% of getting those kind of cases off the ground. They're resource intensive, they're way too challenging. So to make sure that it's survivor-centered, gender responsive, it's not just about creating a mechanism like what we've seen before in Geneva, Geneva-based international lawyers. No, we need to understand that this mechanism has to, of course, have Afghans at its center, Afghan women informing the way we understand the violations and the crimes committed. Okay, the last thing. So yes, we need a mechanism. We can't have a mechanism, support a mechanism, if we're not supporting also civil society. Yes, we have a UN financial liquidity crisis. And my one note on that is that's not an excuse. There are ways to make a mechanism trimmer. There are ways to make it more efficient. So let's talk about it. Let's not stop there that there's a liquidity crisis. I'm sorry, because that's not it. That's not the roadblock here. Yes, there's a crisis, but we can, that doesn't mean we do nothing. Okay, but civil society, because they will still have to shoulder the burden in documentation in a lot of ways, and right now are facing a decimation in their funding, pulling back because everyone's pulling back funding in relation to protection of human rights defenders, protection in accountability. Well, we need to ensure that that funding also goes there, support goes there. And then just a nod, because I know I'm out of time. I have so much more to say, but it's okay. We can keep this conversation because everyone has had so many amazing things to say, and I'm so happy we had this today. But just the last thing. This exploration of unique legal tools to go forward, states not only in the Human Rights Council need to table a resolution, not only need to put resources to it, not only need to put resources to civil society, they also need to ensure that their domestic houses are in order to facilitate these cases. There has been a contraction amongst states all over the world in the use of universal jurisdiction. Again, this is a legal requirement under international law to extradite or prosecute if a perpetrator is on your territory. We see states pulling back from this. We see states eviscerating the resources they put to international crimes units within their domestic units. So just wanted to add that onto the piece that we do need to look more into universal jurisdiction. We need states to meet us, civil society, there, in addition to meeting us there in all other respects. And thank you.
Thank you so much. Finally, I welcome the dedicated Ms. Fareshta Abbasi, Afghanistan researcher at Human Rights Watch. What concrete steps can be taken to build stronger bridges across all actors in the international community to advance survivor-centered accountability using the all tools approach?
Thanks so much, Mira. Firstly, I would like to remind all of us that it's the end of the day. I know you're all tired, you're all exhausted, and I mean, especially Afghan women in the room, because they have been tirelessly advocating this week at the Human Rights Council. And at this point, I feel in a way, we're repeating ourselves because we keep calling on the same thing every session that we come here. And I'm really hoping, and I agree with Raquel, that it needs to really move because the civil society have been calling for the establishment of an accountability mechanism as we are at the Human Rights Council. I think we need to talk about it because the Human Rights Council has a mandate to ensure that they're responding to the human rights crisis around the world, and Afghanistan being one of the worst human rights crises in the world, I think they need to ensure that they're responding to this crisis adequately. And I always reference it back to the call for the mechanism because this is one of the priority calls of the civil society that have been tirelessly advocating at the hallways of Human Rights Council, talking with different actors, having bilateral meetings, and I mean and again building on what Raquel said that referencing to the OHCHR report last year, who mentioned the need for a comprehensive accountability for Afghanistan, the EU Council resolution, which was passed with consensus on October, and the joint statement by a cross-regional group in March, calling for the establishment of the mechanism. I also would like to, the Special Rapporteur is not in the room, but I also would like to extend a heartfelt thanks to him for all the efforts that he has been doing. He just presented his latest report on access to barriers on access to justice for women and girls on Monday, and also recommended the establishment of the mechanism. His work has been very vital for the work of civil society. His loud voice and advocacy for Afghan women, I think, is really has been a big and huge support for women of Afghanistan. Even though he's not in the room, I would like to thank him for and his team for all the great work that they have been doing. The mechanism that we're talking would be distinct, but very much complementary to the work of Special Rapporteur. So the Special Rapporteur currently is documenting, investigating, and monitoring and preserving information in Afghanistan. But again, building on what Raquel said, what the civil society, more than 90 organizations, which includes 70 plus Afghan organizations, are calling for a mechanism that can document, monitor, and preserve evidence up to a standard that could be used in a court of law. No one is currently doing that in Afghanistan, and that is a huge gap for Afghanistan. The culture of immunity in Afghanistan has been ongoing for years, and this cycle needs to be broken. Sorry, I'm very tired, and English is the first skill that I lose when I'm tired. All what is happening in Afghanistan, all parties to the conflict have been doing this without being held accountable. It includes all what happened in the 90s, the first Taliban takeover. It includes what happened during the civil war. It includes the coalition forces that have allegedly committed war crimes in Afghanistan. It includes former government officials. It includes the Taliban. It includes the ISKP and different actors in Afghanistan. So we're speaking about comprehensive accountability. The mechanism and the reason for that is that for any sort of accountability mechanism, it needs to be comprehensive, because otherwise it's not legitimate. We are at the stage in international human rights sphere that we don't want to be creating more hierarchies. We don't want to be creating double standards. We don't want to say that this victim needs to be prioritized over another victim. Think about a woman who lived under the first Taliban takeover. Think about victims in different parts of Afghanistan. Think about victims in the south of Afghanistan who nobody ever documented. The war crimes that happened, the crimes against humanity. Unfortunately, Afghanistan is a country that have been going through really tough times. And I'm saying this just to set a little bit of the context, to say that even before August 2021, Afghanistan was one of the worst countries in the world to be a woman in. So we as Afghan women have a long fight ahead of us. But what worries me at this point is that there isn't enough response to the situation. I was just talking to a friend in Kabul yesterday who told me that with every day of all these abuses ongoing and with the international community not responding to that, she fears that things are being normalized. And I think in a way it is. All what is happening in Afghanistan is sort of normalized, because we're so used to now hearing that, well, women and girls in Afghanistan don't have access to secondary and higher education. We're used to hear that women in Afghanistan don't have access to work. And I'm worried that down the line, in the next another 5 years, a girl who's born in 2021 and is around 9 years old will not know that this is not normal. She will not have any understanding that she's entitled to every fundamental right that every human being has on this planet. She has no idea about the universality of rights. She doesn't know what she's entitled to. And that 9-year-old brother has also no idea that it's not okay for her sister to stay at home. And I think I think there is an agreement, even in this room, within the diplomats, with the people that we are speaking to, that there is a need to move further. And I think the civil society is giving you some of the recipe on how to move forward. I mean, establish the mechanism, establish an accountability mechanism for Afghanistan that identify perpetrators. Let the Taliban know that the UN independent mechanism is documenting those violations that is happening. I mean, we have had cases of female protesters being detained. We have some of them in the room here, and I also would like to express my deep respect to the brave work of these women. These women have been detained and tortured by the Taliban only because they were asking for their basic rights. Who is the person who tortured them? We still don't know. We don't know the name of that person. No case is being built for him. Who is implementing the Taliban's policy? Who within the Taliban leadership is responsible for imposing these abusive policies against women and girls? But also, Taliban are responsible for extrajudiciary killings of former security officers, former government employees, human rights defenders, journalists. They've committed war crimes in Panjshir. So I think all these to say that it's time to move forward and hold them accountable. I mean, again, I have said this so many times, and I mean, I have been advocating in the hallways of Human Rights Council enough, and probably some of the diplomats in room know me, and they're sick of me keep saying this. But this is what the Afghan civil society believes is one of the things that you can do for Afghanistan. And don't delay it. Establish immediately a comprehensive additional accountability mechanism to the vital work of the Special Rapporteur, who can document and identify perpetrators on the ground, because as Raquel said, we are very concerned that the physical evidence will go away. I mean, in the past 4 years, ICC remains the only institution who has identified just a few of the Taliban leadership, few perpetrators, and that's it. And this mechanism will complement complement the ongoing ICC investigation, the potential CEDAW case that 4 states have announced. I mean, Germany, Australia, Netherlands, and Canada. It will also be able down the line to help the universal jurisdiction cases. But also, let's hope that one day, all these Afghan women who's sitting here in this room today and cannot go back to Afghanistan can go back to Afghanistan, and there's a national process. And at the time, then we can use all these evidence to hold these perpetrators accountable. Thank you.
Close this panel, and I give it for concluding remarks if there's a minute for that.
Thank you very much. I think concluding remark is always very difficult to do, but I'll be as quick as possible. First, I would like to thank Soraya, who I've had the pleasure of working with for the past 3 years now. I mean, I'm truly in awe of her tireless work, effort, and passion for justice and accountability. She's truly my role model when I see her work so incredibly hard. So thank you. I also would like to express my deep gratitude. I think the ambassador is not here, for Ambassador Andisha, for his principled leadership. Also, Richard Bennet. I think a lot of us are truly thankful to him for the work that he does and the tireless documentation, even though he's in a bit of a budget issues. Also, Ms. Claire, Deputy Permanent Representative of France, for reminding us that solidarity must be matched with accountability. In the first panel on the voices from the ground, we've heard voices that speak not just of suffering, but of survival, courage, and resistance. Afghan women are not just waiting to be saved, they are saving themselves and each other. From secret classrooms in Kabul, which was emphasized a few times, to UN halls in Geneva, they're reclaiming power, memory, and dignity. I think the message from the panel was quite clear. What is happening in Afghanistan is gender apartheid, as was expressed by Ms. Parwana. The Taliban have built a regime where the oppression of women and girls is not incidental, there's policy, it's systematic, and it's being normalized through global silence. And as for Hazara women, this is not just gendered violence, it is ethnic violence and it's religious persecution from Zakia. And we heard that Hazara families are being attacked, displaced, and dispossessed by Taliban-backed armed groups in Behzud. From Ms. Sajida, who is a survivor and lost 54 of her classmates in one day, expressed the attack was not just isolated, they're part of a broader campaign of persecution and genocidal attack against Hazaras. And Zakia and Sajida both demanded for recognition of Hazara genocide. If the international community truly believes in never again, now is the time to act, as Afghanistani women and girls cannot afford more symbolic gesture or statements of concern without consequences. Ms. Wardak highlighted that we women are the legitimate opposition to the Taliban, which I absolutely agree, and yet despite all of this, we continue to be excluded from negotiations, from conferences, and from all decision-making platforms that, that is about Afghanistan's future. She also stressed that we must ensure representation is diverse and grounded. She emphasized that education must reflect the ethnic, geographical, class, and generational diversity of Afghanistan, not just elites, not just diaspora, but actually rural women, young women, and those from marginalized groups must be at the center. We heard really fantastic recommendations, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to list a couple. So, yeah. So we talked about establishing a global mechanism for to document gender and ethnic-based crimes, legally recognize gender apartheid, provide direct support for Afghan women-led networks inside and outside Afghanistan, and hold all actors, those including those who engage with the Taliban, without condition accountable. Quickly on panel 2, thank you to my colleague, Dr. Kiovanda, for moderating this powerful discussion. We heard from Ms. Somerville, and we reminded that gender injustice cannot be separated from political justice, that solidarity with Afghanistani women must be grounded in intersectional understanding and institutional commitment. Dr. Farkhunda Akbari raised a very critical point about the fragility and fragmentation of past political coalitions in Afghanistan, and she urged us to move away from exclusionary short-term alliances towards a long-term coalition rooted in shared values, justice, pluralism, and human dignity. Without this, she reminded us that we risk replicating the very system that failed Afghanistan. Dr. Amini highlighted how non-recognition of the Taliban and the emergence of online education and grassroots advocacy are not only signs of survival, but signs of a strategic resistance. Dr. Ilmas reinforced that solidarity should not be reactive but intentional. It must address not only symptoms but structures. Her work underscores Afghanistani women's rights are not a humanitarian issue, but they are a political imperative. Dr. Igdir put it powerfully that Afghan women are not witnessing just oppression, they're witnessing erasure. And yet, even under conditions of exclusion and terror, they are rising from secret classroom to boardrooms to defend the rights that many in the world take for granted. Very quickly for panel 3, because I was still trying to make my notes as we stopped. But thank you, Mira, for moderating this panel on justice and accountability. Ms. Rana, a powerful statement. She reminded us gender apartheid is a reality that demands a legal response. She called for the international community, and I really appreciate the support on your support on the recognition or codifying gender apartheid in Afghanistan. Ms. Nasrullah Jamshidi took us deeper into what survivor-centered justice means in practice. It's not just about punishing perpetrators, she said, it's about creating a system that are safe, inclusive, and healing, and preventing cycles of violence. She urged us to listen with experimental humility, stressing that justice must be defined by those who have survived them. Ilaha from Pakistan gave a very powerful, emotional testimony, and she said that shared her family's resistance on the Taliban persecution. She, I quote, "They called us infidels and tried to demolish our existence," she said. Her testimony is not just call for justice, it is called for protection, recognition, and healing for those in exile and still inside of Afghanistan. Mr. Kal, a fantastic talk, and I was completely really drawn in, and thank you so much for making that clear for those of us, especially in this room, working on accountability mechanism. And you looked at, you brought precision and urgency to the legal dimension. We don't have a body that can investigate to a criminal law standard, she said. If we want justice, and if we want convictions, we need that. We need evidence preservation. We need Afghan lawyers and civil societies as equal partners in this process. So thank you for making that clear. And Ms. Abbasi from Human Rights Watch echoed this call. No one is currently documenting to the level needed for a court of law, and that is a huge gap. She warned against selective justice, urging comprehensive accountability for all parties to the conflict, from the Taliban to coalition forces. She rightly concluded, without legitimacy and inclusion, accountability efforts will only replicate injustice. Thank you very much. Over to you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, I will not get too much of your time. I know everybody is tired. But as we bring this powerful and deeply moving event to an end, I want to begin by expressing my heartfelt gratitude to everyone who made this possible. To the courageous women who joined us and the voices from the ground, thank you. Your testimony is not just a record of the resilience, it's a call to the world. In the face of unimaginable challenge, you continue to speak, to act, and to lead. Your voices carry the weight of our history and the promise of a future that must and will be different. To the partners, allies, and advocates in global solidarity and commitments, thank you for reminding us that women of Afghanistan are not and must never be alone in this struggle. Solidarity is more than a word, it's action, it's consistency, and it's the political will to stand beside women, not only when it's convenient, but especially when it's hard. And to those who contributed to our conversations on justice and accountability. Your work is essential. Justice cannot be delayed indefinitely. Every violation must be recorded, every silence must be challenged, and accountability must not be forgotten. Today was not just a moment of reflection, it was a declaration that we will not look away, that the erasure of women of Afghanistan from public life, from education, from decision-making will not be normalized. Let us be honest, the road ahead is long, but it's not hopeless. Because we are where there are women raising their voices, there is resistance. Where there is international commitment, there is pressure. Where there is documentation of injustice, there is the foundation for future accountability. And where there is solidarity, there is strength. So let us leave this panel with determination. Let us carry the voices we heard today into our work, our institutions, and our daily conversation. That no woman anywhere should have to fight alone for the right to live, to learn, to lead. Thank you all for your presence, for your patience, and your partnership. And above all, thank you to the women of Afghanistan. You're not forgotten. You're not alone, and you are not done. Thank you.